Good morning, everybody, and welcome to September's webinar. Delighted to welcome our special guest today, Dave Seager, who many of you may know. He's ex-MD of CFA Professional and currently consulting advisor to the CFA Professional. We've got Nick Parkhouse, our head of content, joining us as well. All will be explained in a minute. And today we're going to be talking about building professional connections, specifically with solicitors. And as I say, delighted to welcome Dave here. If he doesn't know about the subject, I don't know who does. So we'll join Dave in a second. Today's webinar is a Q&A. So no PowerPoint slides, apart from the one that you can see in front of you. And I think we can probably take that down now, so you can see us. As I say, it's Q&A today. And Dan will explain in time-honoured tradition how we're going to do it.
Sure thing. So, hi, I'm Dan. My job's to make sure everything's running smoothly. So if it's not running smoothly, it means I've done something wrong. So let us know in the chat if the sound goes off or the screen isn't sharing when it's supposed to, and I'll push some buttons my end and see what I can do there. A recording of this will be sent out afterwards, so you can watch it again or share it with anybody you think might find it useful. And these sessions work well with plenty of questions, so don't be afraid to get stuck in. There are essentially two ways you can do that. So either ask them in the chat function or the little Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. Just click that, type your question in. I'll be reading them out as we go along. I may save a few for, naturally where they fall in the conversation, and any that we don't get to, we'll be sweeping up at the end, providing we've got time to do so. So without further ado, over to you, Phil and Dave. Thanks.
Just before we get to Dave, Nick's here because we're doing something new at the Yardstick Agency. It's a little parish notice. For the first time ever, we've launched a poetry competition. It's in aid of a great cause. And Nick, our head of content, is here just to explain a little bit more, if you would, Nick.
Good morning, all. So I'm Nick. As you will all know, it's National Poetry Day on the 7th of October. I imagine it's already in your calendar. We're running a very special poetry competition to raise money for Book Trust, who are the UK's leading children's reading charity. It's really simple to enter. All you've got to do is write a poem about something to do with personal finance. So if you want to write a limerick about inheritance tax, or a haiku about pensions, or a sonnet about the annual allowance, then that's the sort of thing that we're after. So all the details are on the Yardstick Agency website, which is at theyardstick.agency.co.uk/blog. You can find all the details in there. We're asking for a donation to Book Trust with your entry. There are some book tokens for the winners, and we've got someone from the charity who's going to judge the competition as well. So just get the word out there. We're trying to raise as much money as we can for a great charity, mainly for their Christmas appeal. What they do at Christmas is they send books out to kids in care homes and that sort of thing. So they get like a Christmas present on Christmas Day to open. Loads of stuff. They send books to provide books free of charge to schools and that sort of thing. So it's a great cause. So yeah, get your creative juices flowing, come up with a poem, email it to us, poetry@theyardstick.agency.co.uk. Find all the details on our website, on our Twitter @Yardstick Agency, and yeah, look forward to reading your work.
Thank you, Nick. Very kind of you. Thank you. Hopefully we get lots of poets, sonnets, haikus, and limericks coming in. Dan has just put the details in the chat at the Just Giving page and the blog. So thanks, Nick, much appreciated. So Dave, over to you. Hopefully you're suitably inspired by that, and I'm going to go and pen a little poem about solicitors.
What rhymes with lawyer? Yeah.
Let's start with, for those who don't know you, just give us a bit of potted history about you, Dave, if that's okay, your role now, your history, and how CFA fits into that.
Sure. I've only ever worked in financial services since 1988. I was direct selling for a couple of years for my sins, and then I joined what was then Scottish Mutual Assurance Society as a broker consultant, and I was actually man and boy right through till Abbey for Intermediaries, that disastrous experiment. I moved then from being a regional broker consultant into national accounts and sort of relationship management at Abbey for Intermediaries, and then was headhunted by Legal & General. I spent 4 years doing that similar sort of key relationship role at Legal & General, and at both those organisations, Abbey and latterly and Legal & General, I looked after CIFA as one of my key accounts. And back in those days, CIFA was primarily made up of solicitor IFAs, and CIFA was their service provider. And they were a key account for Legal & General, and I spent a lot of time working with the then managing director of CIFA, Ian Muirhead. And when the Legal Services Act came in 2007, CIFA were branching out away from just working with solicitors and their own in-house IFAs, because there was less and less of that, and more about helping good quality IFAs work with solicitors with the knowledge and the relationships that we had. And I came to join him and help him do that. And that side of the business is what became known as CIFA Professional. So CIFA was the service provider, and CIFA Professional was the marketing resource, training, ongoing legal updates, everything you needed as a successful financial planning firm to work with solicitors. CIFA Professional would provide, and still does. So I've been there since 2008 until June this year, when I stepped into sort of semi-retirement, although I am still actively involved and advising the business on a sort of less than day-to-day basis, shall we say. But so yeah, no, CIFA Professional as an entity now has been going since 2009, when we launched that side of the business, and is still helping good quality financial advisors work with solicitors. I just do it slightly less than I used to. But so, effectively in a 30 plus year, career in financial services, the last 13 of which I spent purely in the sort of overlap between legal and financial, hence it became a bit of a specialism for me.
Okay, thanks for that. That's really useful and interesting for people who don't already know you. For you, what are the key benefits to a advisor or planner of forming a relationship with a solicitor?
Well, I think inherently the obvious thing that people are always going to turn to is new clients, and then getting referrals with solicitors would generally be seen as the nirvana for a good quality financial planner. They tend to be of good quality if you can get those referrals, and getting those referrals consistently is obviously the end game. But it's more than that. It's more than new clients, I think, and it will probably come up with a lot of the questions. I think the modern day client is not the client we might have had 20 years ago or 15 years ago. As an industry in financial services, we were quite transactional, quite product or solution driven, rather than working with a client over time on a plan. So the fact that our relationship with our clients has changed quite a lot, why would we in our little silo believe that it will be any different, for other professional, advisors such as accountants or solicitors? Of course it isn't. The key is that solicitors don't have that ready-made ongoing relationship piece that IFAs have, so financial planners have. So what's in it for the solicitor is just as much as important as what's in it for the financial advisor. I think we just have to accept that clients are more holistic. Clients don't think in silos. So as an industry or as a collaborative approach, we shouldn't be offering them solutions in silos. So I think, what's in it is more than just getting new clients for a good quality financial planning firm. It's about building a network of solutions that link to what you're doing. So it's, you will have various points in what you're doing as a financial planner where you're going to need the input from another professional. So I think thinking of beyond yes, it's a nice new client, which is important, and thinking beyond that into the ongoing relationship piece with your client and providing a more comprehensive service is really where we're going, where we should be going, I think.
And you touched on it there. We talked about what's in it for the advisor or planner. What's in it for the solicitor?
Well, I think it's the same thing. I think certainly the thing that I used to say a lot when I used to present to people, particularly after the Legal Services Act and when there was a lot of change in the legal world. You can think about all the things that are important, but the one thing that people forget is the ongoing relationship. What the financial planner offers that solicitor is a more ongoing connection with a client. What I would say is the ability to turn Freudian slip, to turn that perhaps transactional one-off or occasional customer into something more ongoing, but a proper client. And as I say, I used to use the same jokes all the time, and they're just as valid as they are today. You don't hear solicitors saying, I did a great divorce for you last year, can I do you another one? I did the probate for your mum. By the way, how is your dad? They don't have that ready-made reason to pick up the phone and say, let's do some more stuff together, which of course we do. In financial planning, that's exactly what we do. So what we're offering the solicitor is perhaps that repeat relationship that will turn them back to where they were 200 years ago, where the solicitor was seen of as the trusted advisor of a family. They were the trusted advisor. There were no such things as financial planners. In those days, everything was done by the family solicitor, and that's changed over time. And I think financial planners can help solicitors get back to the centre of a client's affairs by giving them that reintroduction, on an ongoing basis to that relationship.
And solicitors firms have obviously, in larger firms, certainly, there's different departments in there. Which are the key departments that advisors and planners should be quote unquote targeting? And
well, I think that
And what type of work can they pass over?
Well, I think obviously that would there's far wide reaching answers, and that would depend on your individual firm. But there are obvious crossover areas around estate planning, with wills and probate, the provision of trusts in the same world. When it comes to pensions and divorce, obviously you're looking at the family department, whether it's legal separation or divorce, and there's a lot of changes obviously coming down the pipeline in that world, which will be very, very interesting to good quality financial planners who are working in that market. And then, of course, outside of the wealth management space, you've got the conveyancing departments. If you're into mortgage and protection with your firm, that's an obvious crossover. And the one that most people may not think of, some of the more niche stuff would be working with expats. If people are emigrating, there's crossover there, and very much in the corporate space. If you're working in corporate, whether it's critical illness or protection around key man or partnership, or setting the cross option agreements up. We can all go to the life company and get those sort of trusts and cross option agreements and everything, but we could also go to a solicitor and work collaboratively there. So there's lots of areas, but I do think the most prevalent now are the estate planning, inheritance tax, trustee investment, pensions, divorce, and the other big one, which I think pensions freedom and the modern world has really brought into the fore, is elderly clients and dealing with vulnerable clients, because that crossover between retirement planning, estate planning, and care planning, it can all blur into one, and it's really important at that stage of life, when you are vulnerable, when you are perhaps dealing with attorneys rather than the individual clients, that you do have that close working relationship. So there's lots of areas, and it would depend on your individual firm, whether you're going to target. I would always say lead with your trump card, because bear in mind, when you're dealing with solicitors, they have spent 7 years to get to that point, and then they're going to specialise in one area of law. If you walk in as a one-man band or a two-man band and say we're experts at every area of financial planning, you're probably going to fall at the first hurdle, because they simply won't believe you.
And that's an interesting point, actually, that you raised. Solicitors have worked for 7 years to get where they are. How do they perceive financial advisors and financial planners now? And how has that changed over the past few years?
Oh, it absolutely has changed. And I think we have to accept that, because certainly when I first started working in the space, there was still we were still dealing primarily with product and commission, which we no longer are. So that's a massive game changer. Solicitors were very suspicious. Of course, the irony is that the solicitor's model is very much dependent on chasing or waiting for the new client, as I've already hinted. They don't necessarily have that ongoing relationship. But of course, that was the same 15 years ago in our world. Everything was, why would you spend time looking after an existing client when you could go and chase a 7% commission on a new bond type of thing? So our industry's changed, and solicitors did think of our industry as not very professional. Perhaps you were a double glazing salesman a couple of years earlier, or you worked for a bank, and maybe you were commission hungry, and maybe you even wore white socks. There was a poor perception, but it's definitely changed over time. RDR helped massively. The introduction of the need for higher qualifications, and they do recognise those qualifications. They do understand charter. They do understand the qualifications. But going beyond that, a good bit of advice, and always a strong bit of advice, would be to consider the accreditations and qualifications that you can take, that take you, forgive the pun, stepping into their world, whether it be a step qualification, or whether it's society of later life advisors, whether it's dealing with resolution and becoming. There's less than 40 pension on divorce experts who've actually got the resolution accreditation for financial services. There might be 600. I think there's about 600 financial advisors who are members of resolution, but there's less than 40 who've got the qualification. There's massive opportunities there to do qualifications that were more relevant to them.
Just say that again. There's fewer than 40 people.
Well, there's 6,000 members of resolution, the predominance of which are different types of lawyer, mediators, and so forth. I think there are around somewhere between 500 and 600 of those 6,000 are from the financial advisory community. So they are members of resolution, which means they can attend the resolution pods and meet solicitors and network and do the courses, which is fantastic. But there is actually a resolution accreditation and qualification that makes you a pension on divorce expert. Last time I looked, there were less than 40 of those across the whole of the United Kingdom. It's not an easy
massive opportunity.
It's a massive opportunity, but it's a very, very in-depth. You can't dabble in pension and divorce, in my opinion. You need to be an expert, and you need to be confident that you can work alongside solicitors. But the legal world is crying out for people from financial planning that they trust to deal with the financial aspects of divorce.
I see a couple of questions coming in about restricted firms. I'll come to those in a second, if that's okay.
Yeah, I saw that.
That's going to dovetail perfectly with something that I want to ask. But obviously, it sounds as though if it's 6,000 down to 600 advisors and only 40 of those have got the accreditation, that sounds like there's a massive opportunity for those advisors and planners who genuinely want to work in that space to differentiate themselves. Yeah,
and particularly with the no contest divorce coming down the pipeline, it's been put back. The Queen's speech is going, but it is coming. So you're not going to have that reason to get divorced. It's going to be a lot simpler, a lot more collaborative. So the working collaboratively with two separating parties, where you've got a financial advisor and a solicitor, is going to be increasingly important.
Interesting. So just looking back at a kind of macro level, what are the different types of relationships you see between advisors and planners and solicitors? And what's most successful?
Well, there was obviously, back in the early noughties, there was a rush from financial planners to enter into JVs with solicitors. It was seen as the perfect scenario. You weren't reliant on competing with other firms for referrals. You're going to have a business structure, and all these sort of solicitors, associates, lawyers within that firm are going to refer into the JV. And there are still some very successful JVs out there. However, there are complications. You're always going to have you need, and I don't know, it's too much detail for today, but you need to have everybody on the management of the law firm involved. You have to have buy-in from everyone for a JV to work. But the other thing is, I think financial advisors, because it was seen as such a badge of honor to get a JV with a professional connection, there wasn't enough planning done. So, I've got a JV with a solicitor, but without any actually quantifying, how many divorces did you do last year? How many wills did you do? How many? What was the likely amount of work that was going to be referred into the JV? So, a lot have been formed and fallen by the wayside. It was popular as well because obviously it's always been difficult for solicitors to earn money from financial services legitimately. Any fee or any money that was coming from the financial planning system was deemed to be the client's and had to be revealed to the client, and the client had to give permission, all this hoops you had to jump through. So whereas if you were referring to a JV, obviously the income would be shares or dividends from the JV. So that was why it was popular. And also you as a solicitor could set up something that made you look bigger and more encompassing in your services. So you might have had Joe Blogg's solicitor, but now you've got Joe Blogg's financial management. So it was popular in that sense. That said, I still think the most popular and most logical is just a third-party referral relationship. And the reason why that works well is it doesn't have all the restrictions, but equally, I think, and there's some stuff in the new Solicitors Code of Conduct, the regulations that changed in 2019, solicitors have to be deemed, and it might lead into your next question, they have to be seen to be acting with independence. And that doesn't mean only referring to independent financial advisors, it means acting with independence. So to refer only to one third party, whether it's a JV or otherwise, is looked upon as is that really always going to be, can that always be in the client's best interest? Is the same financial planner always going to be the right safe pair of hands for that client? So to have a handful, a short panel, a specialist panel, you know, a preferred list of good quality financial planners that you as a firm of solicitors work with is definitely, I think, the best way forward. And also the regulator of solicitors would see that as the most logical way forward. So then you'll be coming back to working with the people that have the specialisms and the qualifications suited for that type of referral. There is also the other one, since the Legal Services Act, you can set up an alternative business structure, which obviously can have solicitors and, you know, financial advisors on the management. The other thing that's interesting, and it hasn't taken off yet, and most IFAs probably, or financial planners, may not be aware of this. One of the things that changed in the last raft of the introduction of the solicitors' new standards and regulations in 2019 is you can set up as a solicitor to deal. It's called freelance soliciting. That could be confused with something else, couldn't it? But as a freelance solicitor, you can offer non-reserved activities. And non-reserved, there are certain activities that are reserved to solicitors. You know, grant of probate, conveyancing, litigation are reserved to solicitors. No one else, no other type of lawyer can do them. There are other services, divorce, trusts, wills, that are non-reserved and can be offered by non-solicitors. Since 2019, solicitors can offer those activities regulated by the Solicitors Regulation Authority, but not within an SRA regulated business. You might be able to see where I'm going here. So if you are the financial planner who's so fed up of trying to work with solicitors and you've never made it work, but you would like to offer certain legal services to your clients, you can now employ a solicitor regulated not by the FCA, by the SRA, but within your business to offer those services to your clients. So it hasn't taken off yet. It's going to be a watch this space with interest for me. I think that's something that certain financial planning firms might think, actually, you know what, the main areas of referral for me, you know, I'd love to have a grip on, you know, certain types of work. You know, for example, if I know a client needs a power of attorney, I'm going to make that referral. That's an obvious referral. But maybe we can actually employ a solicitor that does all our own power of attorneys within our firm, for example. So there's lots of different options, but I do think the straightforward referral, but with some sort of recognised relationship piece. There are third-party agreements that we can provide at Seager Professional, or you know, or you can, you know, your service provider or network might provide them. But you know, there's some wordings. The only other thing you have to be careful of, if you are going to pay a fee, and it's not necessarily frowned upon, it's what's called, for a solicitor, it's called a referral to a separate business. And that's confusing because a separate business actually is a JV or somewhere where you are going to generate income. If you are going to generate a fee or income, you have to get the client's informed consent. So if a solicitor is referring to a financial planner and the financial planner is agreeing to pay the solicitor a fee, it is possible, but the client has to agree to it and sign their informed consent. So there are business agreements. So where that's going to be common practice, the Solicitors Regulation Authority would expect to see some sort of formal agreement between the solicitor and the third party. Probably, you know, it's too much detail for a webinar. But
we can do a whole separate webinar on that.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I want to talk about now, I mean, that's fascinating. Especially the idea of employing a solicitor in a financial services practice. What I want to talk about now is what are the characteristics in a financial advisor plan that solicitors are looking for? What are the key things that solicitors are looking for? You mentioned earlier about those accreditations, and this also speaks to a couple of questions that Dan, do you want to just read out, Dan, if that's okay?
Yeah, sure thing. So we've got two questions that focus around restricted advisors. So the first is, looking at the website, despite the CIFA name, do you admit restricted advisors as long as they meet your due diligence criteria? And then on the second question, what then are the specific points which restricted advisors need to take into account when approaching solicitors?
Yeah, again, a webinar on its own. But the thing is that we need to understand is there's always been this, and in my view, still correctly, that solicitors should only refer to what I would say the I should stand for impartial. So for CIFA, it stands for impartial. It doesn't say that because the Solicitors for Independent Financial Advice was when all our members were solicitors and they could only give independent financial advice. The goalpost moved in 2012. because of RDR, the SRA said to the FCA, or FSA as it was, well, what are you doing? We don't really understand what you're doing with this new definition of independence. It's very confusing. And the FSA helpfully said, well, we don't care, do what you want to do. So the SRA, bear in mind that solicitors had always referred to stockbrokers, had referred to discretionary fund management groups. Both of those were only ever going to be restricted in the new world. So the SRA was put in a bit of a tricky situation by the changes and by this convoluted definition of independence. So the SRA settled on, and the key thing to understand, and it's absolutely critical to everything you do with solicitors, is you have to recognise that they have to, as one of their core 7 principles in everything they do, they have to be seen and to be demonstrably working in the client's best interests. So the definition of what is right when it comes to referral is it in your client's best interests? So the next question is, if you're a solicitor or if you're a financial planner talking to a solicitor, how restricted could be in the client's best interests? Now, we might all have our own view on that. CIFA Professionals' view is that because of the RDR, we were left in a situation where you could, for example, be a financial planner who was going to be restricted, but was going to be impartial or independent in your own world. I'll give you an example. I'm only going to work in the later life financial planning space. I can deal with every immediate care annuity, every equity release I want to deal with. I'm not going to advise on structured products, so I'm therefore I'm restricted. But in the area of advice where a solicitor might refer to me, I'm completely independent. So should I be cut off from working with solicitors because I've chosen to specialise? Probably not, because it still could be deemed to be in the client's best interest to refer to that financial planning firm. Similarly, where do you cut off on restricted? Because we all know there's restricted and there's restricted and there's restricted. Let's say in old money, are you restricted whole of market? Now, if you are restricted whole of market and you can deal with a ridiculous number of solutions, a ridiculous number of products, but not everyone, you could still argue, and I probably would, that you can easily be referring to that firm because they're definitely going to be operating in the client's best interest because it's got such a huge range of choice. Where you might argue, and I would, stick my flag in the ground, I don't think you should be referring to a firm that has a limited number of solutions and they are contractually obliged to use those solutions. That will be where I would stick, my flag in the ground and say, hold on, really, is that in the client's best interest? Whatever area of financial advice, I've only got a limited number of solutions and I have to use them. It's hard for me to go outside those solutions. That is when I think I would struggle as a solicitor or as a compliance officer in a law firm to say, I don't think we should be referring there because I'm not sure that could really be argued that it's in the client's best interest. But that's what you have to understand as a financial planning firm. It's, can you sit down with the compliance officer or the solicitors in the firm that you're working with and strongly argue that referring to you is in their client's best interest and back that up with evidence? That's the question you have to ask. And it's all about helping them with their due diligence, helping them with their research and giving them that information that gives them the confidence that they are doing that.
There's a couple of follow-up questions there, Dan, I think.
So one from Julia. What about SJP?
Well, I think I just described them with my flag in the ground without mentioning. Let's be honest. They're a fantastically run organisation. They've got fantastic resources and marketing, their technical department. So there's lots of areas where you could easily say, well, I can see why that referring to them is in the client's best interest. But the one I struggle with is the limited number of options available. Maybe I don't fully understand the SJP model, but that was where I would struggle. But it's not prohibited. Until 2012, solicitors could only refer to an independent financial advisor. That changed to best interest in 2012.
Brilliant. One more follow-up. What is restricted whole of market?
Well, again, it's an old term in that it's restricted, but it's using pretty much the whole of the market, but not. I don't know. It's one of those industry phrases that it sort of contradicts itself. I think I would give an example where you have a massive range of solutions, but it's not quite the whole market. Would be ironically restricted whole of market. So you're restricted.
I think that defines slightly differently, Dave. Actually.
Yeah. Okay.
Where you're restricted by product type, so you might not recommend UCITS or structured product.
Yeah.
but actually where you can recommend pensions, ISAs, you're then whole of market.
Which is the definition I originally used when I was saying a firm that specialised in later life. Yeah, so you are whole of market in the areas where you've chosen to advise. That would be much better. But equally, there are firms out there that I'm quite comfortable with. I'm not going to name them, but they are restricted. But instead of having maybe 5 or 6 solutions, they might have 20 or 30 solutions in every area. I think you could, as a solicitor, if it's a competent advisor, a great firm, great accreditations, highly qualified, chartered, but they can only deal with 20 or 30 solutions, I still think you'd have a strong case to argue that it could easily be in your client's best interest. I think it's just when you're narrowing it down. And also, we have to mention the fees. The fees and charges could be higher with certain types of, it's restricted, that you would want to avoid if you were a solicitor, I think.
So let's just make it very quick fire list of things that solicitors like: acting in the client's best interests, those higher and specialist accreditations. I think you said solicitors like those. Fees, obviously. What else is?
I think the things that I say, I've done recently. I did a presentation for the Law Society to solicitors, compliance officers, law firms, talking about a safe pair of hands. What does good look like? And what you can't say. It's like anything, isn't it? It's like when you had the old Equus system, you put in what's important to you when you're narrowing down your panel, don't you? So, everyone's slightly different. But I do think that you have to be comfortable in every area. So the qualifications are important. The getting on with people is important. But there are the other areas that aren't necessarily as concrete. And you do a lot of work on this around, what does your website look like? Local reputation. When you see the surveys that go out to solicitors about why clients choose solicitors, local reputation is massively important. So having a local reputation, why would it be any different for a financial advisor? So if I'm a solicitor looking at a financial planning firm, I would probably like to see that they enter poetry competition. Now, I would like to see that they, have a strong presence. Maybe they sponsor a local football team or a rugby team. Maybe they work with local charities. Maybe they write in a local parish magazine. These sort of things might be important. But I think the most important one of all, and it's not a concrete thing, and it's if I was a financial planning firm approaching a solicitor, I can do all these things. Yes, we've been here a long time. Yes, we've got a great reputation. Yes, we've got a clean regulatory record. Yes, we've got higher qualifications. Yes, we've got specialist qualifications. But we also understand that our clients need legal advice. So these are the areas in our process where we will be referring back to you. Because if this isn't a two-way street, for me as a solicitor, it's a non-starter. Why? Okay, it's important for me to offer the client, financial planning advice when they need it. And if I identify that, I should do that. And come back to that about when a solicitor identifies the need for financial planning and doesn't make a referral, because ask me about that, it's important, but I'll break my thread. So I think if I was presenting due diligence to a firm of solicitors, I will be including what my process looked like, what my financial planning process is. What does it entail? Is there cash flow modelling? I hope there is. At what stages will I see the client? And at what stages in the lifestyle of a client do I think I'm going to need to refer them back when they're buying a home, when they need a power of attorney, when they need a will? Identifying that in your process and giving them confidence that that process that you have will engineer opportunities for them is the icing on the cake. And that's the thing that most financial planning firms will miss. We get very blinkered on what's in it for us. Understandably. But I think if you approach the solicitor with, I need a solicitor in my process, I need a firm that's going to do all my wills, I need a firm that's going to do my power of attorney, I need a firm that's going to do my cross-option agreements. If you have that in your mind and you need that, the referrals coming back the other way is almost like it's going to happen inevitably because you're offering them something. So it's that two-way street. Look, we both need to be working hand in hand for the benefit of the mutual client. And that's the bit that I think we miss when we present why us, if you like, to firms of lawyers.
I get it completely. You've got to solve a problem for the solicitor. It's a great door opener. When you are presenting, though, the why us, because you're going to get to that point at some point, what requirements do solicitors have from the SRA? What due diligence requirements on financial advisors do the SRA impose?
Yeah.
And how should advisors and planners make solicitors' lives easy?
Yeah, well, I think that's a key question, isn't it? And what happened was, and it was a game changer, and whether solicitors have accepted it or recognised it fully is a moot point because they have to over time. The SRA in 2019, and there was a long build up to it, introduced what they called standards and regulations. It's replaced the 2012 ones. Now, the 2012 rules, post RDR, if you like, or at that same time, had introduced the role of the compliance officer for legal practice. And the COLP had to be on the management of the firm, so a partner if it was partnership, director if it was limited. They had to be somebody who was on the management of that firm. And in theory, they were responsible for putting in a process when it comes to anything. But referrals to third parties would be deemed a process. Because if a client comes to you as a solicitor and you recognize the need for financial planning and you make a referral, that's part of your process because the process started with you. What was the problem between 2012 and 2019 was there was no, the SRA isn't the FCA. It hasn't got the rule, it hasn't got the staff, it hasn't got the ability to spot check. It doesn't do, let's go take you to a local football stadium and tell you what we want from you. It relies on the integrity and the willingness of solicitors to engage. So the problem was everything about referrals was in the individual code of conduct. And we've all heard of the solicitor's code of conduct. So the solicitor's code of conduct and what you should do when it comes to making referrals is up to the individual solicitor because it's in the individual rule book. There wasn't a corporate rule book. So whilst the COLP role was generated and the COLP was, if you like, given the responsibility, the rules that they should be responsible for ensuring their business is following were in the individual code of conduct. So you might see where I'm going here. So I would be telling a CFA professional, we would be telling a firm to go and see the COLP because they're responsible. And the COLP would say, quite legitimately, well, yes, we understand all the rules around referrals, Dave, or Phil, but those rules are in the individual code of conduct and we trust all our individuals. So that's our process. We trust our individuals to do the right thing because they're our individuals. What we have now in 2019 is the introduction for the first time of a business code of conduct, the firm code of conduct. So within the solicitors' standards and regulations, you have individual code of conduct and a firm code of conduct. And the firm code of conduct very clearly says, and there's one sentence, 2.1, and I can send it to anyone. It probably says in about 5 ways in one sentence that you have to have a process, structure, governance, all these. So the COLP and the management of the firm are responsible to put processes in place to ensure the individual professionalism. So rather than say we trust the individual professionalism, they now have to put parameters and processes in place to ensure the individual professionalism. So, where do we refer work? We have to have a process for that. So the process is the responsibility of the COLP. So the SRA wants the COLP, or the management of the firm, to have paid much more attention as to why that third party is getting our referrals. Not just, I played rugby with that guy years ago, I've always done work with that woman, I played hockey with her, I went to university with that guy. These may be the legitimate people to receive your referrals. They may be the best financial planners in the world. But the SRA wants to see that in a process. So, and the process, obviously, coming back to what I said, has to be demonstrating best interest. So how do you demonstrate to a client that that referral is in their best interest if you haven't done the due diligence? So the rules don't say you have to have due diligence to show your client, but the spirit of the law says you're bonkers if you don't. So the COLP is the person, as a financial planning firm, we should be saying, right, we now know you have to have a process. We'll make that process, we'll help you develop that process because we are a safe pair of hands. And here's why. Here's our due diligence. Here's all the reasons why you should be confident when you're referring clients to us that it's in their best interest. So the parallel, if you like, in financial planning world might be, we always refer to this, we always used to put our offshore bonds into, a discretionary fund management group. So we were doing a bond and we say to that DFM, oh, Brooks McDonald, can you just give me some due diligence for my file? Now, I'm being cynical here, and I said about using Equus or using Synaptic to produce your due diligence. It is about making your life easier and making sure if anybody wants to check that you do have a process. Now, you might design that process and you will have different criteria, but sorry, someone just said, what's the COLP in the question? Compliance officer for legal practice. Sorry, Michael. That is the person responsible on the management firm for putting the processes in place. So yes, you have to have a process. So another tip here is we as financial planners will put a nice PowerPoint together, put a lovely brochure together as to why we are the best financial planning firm. Well, that's great. And you, Phil, would love to help them do that. I know at Yardstick. However, bear in mind, you're giving something to the solicitor that they're going to show their client as to why they're referring to you. So make sure you've got it on your own leverage and also on blank, because you don't want to be giving a solicitor a lovely brochure of yardstick financial planning to say, well, I'm referring you to yardstick financial planning and here's why, and here's a yardstick brochure. This is about being independent. So what you're doing is giving them the information that they can use themselves. So when their solicitors say it's a divorce situation, we know that Michael Warburton Financial Planning is the best person, and we've done all the due diligence. So when we say to the client, look, you're getting divorced, I'm very sorry to hear that. We can handle the legal side, but I can see there's some pensions there. That's out with our remit, but we've done due diligence and we've selected Michael Warburton Financial Planning as our partner. Here's why. Here's why. Are you happy for me to make that referral? Yes, I am. Process.
Okay, I can see the questions coming in. I'm going to give you one quick fire question, Dave, and then we're going to go over to Dan. So we've talked a lot about the characteristics and the things solicitors are looking for in firms they might refer to. Let's do the opposite of that. Quick fire. What really hacks off and really annoys solicitors? If there was 3 things you could do that's going to really annoy a solicitor and you should never do, what are they?
Well, one that you'll love, and it's one of favourite for me because in marketing terms, is jargon. I was told a great story many years ago by somebody who had been worked in financial planning. In fact, he helped set up the offshore Isle of Man for Sun Life, the trust and everything with Brian Lawless. He then, when AXA took over, he went off and did a law degree and became a solicitor. So he was in a very good position. And he said, the thing is, and this is a great story, and I won't swear, although he did, you go and see a firm of solicitors, you see a couple of partners there, you're explaining to them, you think you've had a great meeting, you leave thinking, God, they agreed with everything I said, they nodded in all the right places, what a fantastic meeting, I'm definitely going to get referrals from that firm. And you left the room, and one partner turned to the other one and said, what the bloody hell's a discounted gift trust scheme? Why on earth should a solicitor know what a discounted gift trust scheme is? It's an IHT mitigation solution designed by a life company to help clients. But, that's not part of a law degree. They shouldn't know that. So we do that. We talk in jargon. So that's a key one. So let's talk about what clients actually want, what the solutions are, what they do for clients, not I'm great at pensions, I'm great at investments, I'm great at offshore financial planning. That's a key one. I think the other one is recognizing, I touched on it earlier, you've got to be approaching them in that this is for our mutual benefit and for our mutual clients' benefit. It's a two-way street. In the past, we did a lot of research at CIFA in this sort of late noughties, early, it's about, solicitors said, well, all they ever asked about was referrals. They never asked about us. And when we did refer them work, we never heard from them again. So all they ever wanted was the referral. They didn't actually want a relationship. So, you need to be talking to them about the relationship piece. You need to be talking about them in, common parlance. And, so those, if you don't do those things, that's going to hack them off completely. What else? I think the other thing, a big tip is, and a lot of, there'll probably be people in this audience who do this. You may not actually offer them themselves, but on your website, you say you offer wills. If you have a website that says you do wills, even if it actually isn't you doing them, you're referring to someone else. If I'm a solicitor and you know this field, yardstick, the first, you get a referral, get a recommendation, I'm going to look at the firm's website. And if I look at the IFA's website and it says wills and estate planning, I might not even click on it. I might just say, I'll move on to the next one. So, you need to be careful, at the first point of call when somebody, you're recommended and they're going to look at your website. There's nothing on the website that looks like you're in competition with them. That's a thing that I think people miss. And a lot of financial planners will make the decision that they can earn money from wills, from powers of attorney, and that's fine. Nothing wrong with it, but then don't try and work with solicitors as well. You make a choice. You do it yourself, or you work with professionals.
I think the other thing you said earlier was lead with your specialism. So you don't look like a jack of all trades when you go into a solicitor who specialises in wills and probate or whatever.
Yeah, I think when I said I call it lead with your trump card. You may be good at everything, but start with the bit you're absolutely best at. And once you've got that relationship, hopefully it will spin out to other areas and you can introduce other people. Because it is still a people's business, and it probably is going to start with a meeting between a person and a person. It needs to grow from that. And hopefully in this new era, we will have more firm-to-firm relationships. I think you had a question somewhere. I mean, traditionally it has been individual to individual, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, Colts might be saying, compliance officer for legal practice, oh God, I've got to build this whole process. It may not be building a new process. It might just be putting what you already do into a process. So the firms you've chosen, you've referred to over time, may well be the best firms, and that's fine. record that, put it in a process, and then make sure that everybody in the firm understands that that is the process. And if, as a solicitor, you're going to step outside of that process, then the culp should want to know about it, because the culp is not going to want to be responsible for a process that has 20 different solicitors referring to 20 different financial planning firms. It's just too much for them, within the new world where they are supposed to be responsible for that process.
Good tips. I'm really keen that everybody on the webinar gets their questions answered, their specific questions answered by Dave while we've got him here. So I'm going to take a step back now. And Dan, do you want to work through some of these questions, if that's okay?
Yeah, sure thing. So let's start with questions from Stuart and Jody, because they're broadly similar. They approach the same subject. So Stuart asks, would a solicitor struggle to pass compliance/due diligence if the financial planning firm is new/has newly qualified advisors? And Jody asks, do solicitors view referring to one-man band IFAs a business risk? Which other factors are considered by solicitors when referring financial planners and advisors?
Yeah, I think this is I think they're really good questions, actually. But I think the fact that there is this emphasis now on having a process, and the emphasis also on one of the 7 principles being independence, and that the SRA wouldn't expect you to refer everything to the same firm. As a big firm with multi-departments and multi-specialisms and multi-qualified financial advisors, you might say, well, we can take everything on board, and you may well be right. But the fact that the SRA is keen that you have, a short list, or not referring to one firm, it gives more power to the elbow of the one-man band who is specialising in one area, or the one-woman band, in Jody's case, who is specialising in one particular area. So I think in the past I would have sympathised with the view that, well, I'm a one-man band, what's the point of me trying to talk to a firm of solicitors because I'm just a little old me? I don't think that's the case anymore. I think if you have a specialism and you have the qualifications and you can really, put yourself across as being highly specialist and highly confident in your particular arena, I think you could be part of a firm's process. So I don't think that's as much of an issue as it perhaps might have been in the past.
Brilliant. Right. So I've managed to group 2 questions together again that are broadly similar. So Naomi asked earlier, do you think solicitors value or prioritize working with IFAs that are STEP or Resolution accredited?
Yes.
And Rebecca asks, going back to Resolution and not knowing much about them, is it worth joining with a view to gaining accreditation in the future?
That would almost be 100% the most positive thing you should do, and it would be my advice. Resolution in the past, and they would admit this themselves, didn't make it very clear on their website. They had a section for financial advisors. It wasn't fantastic. It's much better than it used to be. The accreditation was criticised in the past. It's now, the process is there. There's part of it is ongoing work, and you have to be able to do this. You have to demonstrate that you've worked with a solicitor in the past on a collaborative divorce. So you have to say, well, this is a client we work with. This is a solicitor we work with. Now, that was the chicken and egg. Well, if you haven't got the qualifications and you haven't got the trust with solicitors in the pension divorce arena, how do I get to work with them? And the answer is join Resolution. I think it's £40 a year or something. It's nothing to join. And then you're entitled to go to what they call pods, regional pods, which are meetings where solicitors, arbitrators, mediators, financial planners will get together and talk about best practice, talk about things that are happening. And you can build knowledge that way. You can join their webinars, you can build knowledge, you can build CPD. So when you then speak to a firm of solicitors saying, look, you saw me at the last 2 pod meetings, you can see I'm doing the webinars. I'm genuinely serious about working in this arena. I need to work with you, and I'm going to build towards the accreditation, but I can't build towards the accreditation until I can demonstrate I'm working with you. So joining Resolution is absolutely the most important thing to do. With regard to STEP, obviously in 2009, I think it was, we launched the STEP Financial Services qualification actually at the CFA conference, because myself and Ian Muirhead at the time had spoken to the then CEO of STEP, David Harvey, and he said, well, we haven't got enough financial planners who are members of STEP, it's all solicitors. And our suggestion was, well, to do the full TEP, trustee and estate practitioner qualification, as well as at that time, all the qualifications of financial planners were having to do with RDR looming. It was just too much. I said, so we said, why don't you have a qualification that is just for financial planners? And that introduced that, and it is sort of 20 points towards your accreditation. But obviously what it says to solicitors is, I'm taking a step into your world, I'm serious. It's similar to the old G10, it's a taxation and trust paper, but it says, I'm serious about being in your world. But what it also gives you is the ability to call yourself an affiliate of STEP and therefore go to STEP meetings. And again, it gets back to that, showing you're keen to be in their world, networking with the solicitors who are STEP members and building your credibility. So 100% on both. Brilliant.
So staying on STEP and resolution, Philip asks, I thought you had to have defined benefit permissions to join resolution. Is that right?
Not to my knowledge. No.
Brilliant.
Obviously, you can't deal with a divorce that involves, that particular type of pension transfer if you haven't got those qualifications. But that is a tiny percentage of divorce situations, isn't it?
Right. So earlier we spoke about the 3 things that are guaranteed to hack off solicitors. Now, Andrew and Glenn in the questions, they want to do the opposite of hacking off solicitors. So Glenn asks, how do you best start/break the ice with a solicitor department or firm? And Andrew asks, post-pandemic, what are your top 3 recommended ways to approach legal firms?
Well, I think it's always difficult because most relationships, or you might meet a solicitor, you might have met a solicitor, you might have met a solicitor at a business lunch or a breakfast meeting. So your approach will logically be with the individual you've met. And that individual may not be the person that ultimately is the sole arbitrator of the decision about referring to you, because the COLP and the management of the firm will need to be involved. So my tip would be, when you have that connection, would be to quite softly say, look, it's our understanding, and demonstrating knowledge is important, it's our understanding that the rules on referrals have changed slightly since 2019. We believe your firm needs to have a process. We would love to be part of that process. Can you introduce me to the compliance officer for legal practice within your firm? Because there isn't, sadly, a directory of COLPs. You would want to be introduced to that person. But so I'm not saying don't pursue the logical and the time-honoured route of networking and trying to work with individual solicitors and individual departments. But the hot tip would be to get that introduction to the COLP to sort of ratify your involvement in that process, early doors. And I do think, a cold call by phone is an absolute no-no. A well-worded letter in this day and age, probably an email, saying, look, this is who we are. We're very, very keen to work with local law firms. We want them in our process. These are the areas that we need, to have legal advice for our clients. But equally, we think we can help your clients. Can we have a meeting? That's always my preferred approach. A very well-worded professional email that shows the COLP that you've identified them, you understand what they need to be doing, and primarily, but B, you can help them with it. That's my professional, preferred route, if you like.
Brilliant. Right. So next question from Mark, and Mark talks about trusts and trustees. So where an older partner is retiring and the running of the firm is passing to younger partners, there seems to be less interest for the firm to continue acting as trustees on trusts and looking to appoint a professional trustee service. Is that the general direction in your experience?
Honestly, anecdotally, I'd say that's probably correct, but I don't have enough knowledge to give a definitive answer on that. I don't like stepping outside of, I don't, I'd say, I have heard that. And there is an increased use of professional trustees, but I wouldn't know whether it's to do with the older and younger necessarily. Sorry.
Okay, so Lindsay asks, would there be room for specific areas of advice to be referred? For example, referring to an advisor just for protection insurance, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. I mean, the solicitors traditionally, you may or may not know in this audience, where there's, they can actually write their own protection business if it's incidental to their work, if they want to, and it's all COBS, like COBS rules, and they can do, put a term assurance alongside some advice. They have to adhere to certain rules. If they want to refer it and they don't want to do that, the referral rules are the same as for any other type of work. So it's really a case of, can I demonstrate that, referring this protection need to this particular preferred third party is in the client's best interest. It's the same thing. And the one thing I would say, by the way, and it's not necessarily related to a question, but I think it's quite important, and I probably should have stressed it earlier. The rules on referrals, and it's 5.1 and 5.3 of the Solicitor's Code of Conduct, but if they make a referral, it's about the rules of the overall book, if you like, the rule book is best interest. If you're referring to a separate business, i.e. where you're going to generate income as a solicitor, you have to gain the client's informed consent. So you have to get their approval and get their informed consent. Now that could be a signature, it could be a recorded phone call, but to make that referral where you are going to benefit financially, the client has to give their informed consent. Now, my question to the SRA at this point in 2018, when I saw the rules, was, okay, I understand that. Why would it be any different if you're not going to generate fee income or benefit financially? What's the difference? Because you're going to say to a client, I've done my due diligence. This is the firm of financial planners that I've chosen, that it's in your best interest to refer to them. They are this firm. This is why. Are you happy for me to make that referral? The client says yes, and you just do it. Why would you not at that point record that the client said yes and give them their informed consent? And the SRA agreed for two reasons. Firstly, if you're going to make a referral, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be giving personal information out. It might be a telephone number, it might be email, it might be date of birth, because you're going to refer to a third-party financial planner or an accountant and needs to act on that referral. Therefore, GDPR will come into play. But also, the other thing that's quite important when it comes to the legal world is vulnerability. The SRA has the same view on vulnerability as the FCA is. So if you're going through a divorce, if you're recently bereaved, you are a vulnerable client. And if you're dealing with a vulnerable client, you're always going to want to get a recording of acceptance of advice or acceptance of referral. So I've put together informed consent precedents for CFA professional that really give, if you like, a financial planning firm a full kit. Here's how we put together our due diligence. You're going to work with us. If you do work with us and one of your solicitors makes a referral, here's an informed consent precedent that says, I'm referring to this firm. This is why. Are you happy for me to make the referral? Sign here, Mr. and Mrs. Client, or Mr. and Mrs. Client together. You've literally completed your file and your compliance audit. Better to be safe than sorry, because we work in a litigious society, and we work in a society where people forget that they've agreed to things quite conveniently. Sadly.
Right, brilliant. So we've got 2 more questions, but what I'll do just before that is Dave in the comments, not Dave, the panelist, has said that just to confirm, you definitely don't need DB permissions to become resolution accredited. So
that's my understanding. I mean, I don't work for Resolution. My understanding is no, you don't.
And also,
if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but I really don't think that is the case.
No, brilliant. And also Dave mentions some first-hand experience of how he's built a team with the SRA, has seen the JV agreements and never raised an issue that people might find valuable.
Yes, that's Dave Robertson. He's a very good friend of mine. There's nothing wrong with the JV, and it's a great solution for many people, but you just have to, it goes back to that, when you're referring to a separate business, you have to be tighter than tight. And the client has to accept and understand the terms of that JV referral. And there's nothing wrong with that. And it works for a lot of firms.
Okay, so penultimate question from Glenn. Generally, would a solicitor be looking for a percentage of the fees IFAs charge their clients? And if so, what would it be?
Sorry, I was, because I wasn't able to see your mouth then, I lost it. Because a question came up in front of your head and I started reading the question. Can you repeat that?
Of course. So generally, would a solicitor be looking for a percentage of the fees IFA charge their clients? And if so, what would that be?
Generally the answer would be absolutely not. Obviously that you can, as we've discussed at length, refer to a separate business. That's where there is a fee and the client needs to give their informed consent. It's very, very rare. I think smaller solicitors who are struggling financially might, look for that. I have put together a precedent for CFA professional, which obviously will be available to members, and I've done that on the ones where I've been asked, and it's been 0.2%, but it's been 0.2% of the initial fee, not of an ongoing fee. That's quite, I've not seen anybody ask me to put together a precedent, or they're paying away a percentage of ongoing, fund-based or anything like that. So yes, it happens. And the most common I've seen is 0.2%, but it's rare. Most solicitors, want to do it because it's the right thing for the client. And I did say I was going to ask Phil to come back to me on this. And this will be useful for everyone, to be honest. many of you will say, I don't know what that noise is, it's not me, honestly. Many of you may say, well, I've explained all this to a solicitor, and they've said, yes, we understand what we've got to do when we make refer. Is there a bell ringing in the background? Something?
It's Nottingham's Council House. I think you've got about 6 more rings to go.
It means we're out of time. No, a lot of financial planners will, I've spoken to solicitors, they said they understand it, but they decided because it's all a bit of a faff, they're not going to make referrals. And that's a common question. So I asked the question directly of the SRA. I said, so we get this a lot from our members at Seager Professional. You know, they've done everything we've told them to do. They're definitely working professionally in the solicitor. Yeah, we get all that, but we're not going to make a referral. Or even worse, we're going to do the old thing of give someone 3 business cards and they can make their own decision, which, by the way, has never been a rule. It's an old wives' tale. I said this to the SRA. Bear in mind, there are 7 principles that the solicitors have to work by. We've mentioned 2 of them at length: best interest and independence. There's another one called integrity. You always have to act with integrity. So the SRA's answer to me, almost in direct words, was, okay, let me think this through, Dave. So if, as a solicitor, I'm working on a client's behalf, you know, on a legal matter, and I identify the need for complementary financial planning, and I do not make the referral, in my view, I'm in breach of acting in the client's best interest and acting in integrity. So the SRA's view, directly quoted to me, I'm not going to name the individual because he asked me not to, but you know, if you make the referral, you're acting in the client's best interest and integrity. If you don't, having identified that there is a complementary need or an ancillary need, and it's in the client's best interest to get that financial planning because it completes the advice, if you just do the legal bit and don't make the referral, you're in breach of acting in client's best interest and acting in integrity as far as the SRA is concerned. Powerful, that.
It is. And that is a great tip to finish on. And something that absolutely can be used delicately, I suspect, when you're talking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's like the old, when you're selling critical illness or waiver of premium, and as a financial planner, you ask the client to sign a, well, okay, I said you needed critical illness, PHI and life insurance. You opted to just have life insurance. Will you sign here for my file that you didn't take my advice? Well, it's that type of, unfortunately, without covering my situation, that is the society we live in. We do live in a compensation, client culture. I remember being in America in the late 80s and every other advert was compensation. And I said, that'll never happen in England, crikey. How wrong could you be? So it is important. It is about, completing that file, making sure that if anybody wants to know, I said to the client, I'm doing my legal bit. There's definitely some financial work that needs to be done. I recommend this person. If you don't want to take my recommendation, that's fine. But I made the recommendation and create that audit. That would be my advice to a solicitor. So as a financial planner, talk to a solicitor. That in turn is the advice you would give.
That is a great tip to finish on, Dave. I just want to say thank you to Dan for your hard work on the questions. I thought there'd be a lot today. Dave, massive thanks to you for giving it all the time to appear on the webinar today. It's really appreciated. We're going to send a recording out later on today to everybody. Watch all the way to the end again for that great tip from Dave. And we'll also put the link in for the poetry competition. Start writing your poems, your sonnets, your limericks, a haiku. I haven't got a clue what a haiku is, but I'm going to go and look that up.
There's a couple of, can I just say, I will put the link into Seager Professional if people do want to look at Seager Professional. The other thing I'll say is, just very quickly, if you allow me, I'm doing some consultancy work for a brand new launch called RQ Ratings. And RQ Ratings they are already working with good quality financial planners to create a compliance due diligence audit for solicitors and accountants to use. And in turn, it will give the COPs or the compliance officers of the accountancy firms as well, the ability to develop a process and to say to all their solicitors, look, when you make the recommendation, these are the firms that we've used. They're on the RQ rating system and you can create that compliance audit. So it's going to be full launch next year, but just Google RQ ratings. You might find it's a great way to help you put together your due diligence pack for solicitors.
I had a look at their website yesterday. It looks very interesting. So we'll send out the recording later on. We'll put Dave's contact details in there. It's very easy to find on LinkedIn, but we'll put Dave's contact details in there. We'll put the links in for the poetry competition. And once again, thanks, Dave. We'll be back next month with another webinar.
There's 17 more questions at the bottom. Sorry, everyone.
Go and enjoy the sun, everybody.
Yes, thank you.
Brilliant. Take care, guys. Thanks.